Sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
What does it feel like to be a Great British Giveaway winner?
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God, I'm going to cry.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon.
Yes, that is fantastic.
You know, you have no idea how much I needed it. Oh my goodness.
You've won £54,321.
Please don't joke. This would change my life.
Oh, thank you so much. I was gobsmacked. Thank you, GB News.
I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Thank you.
You weren't expecting to get that call today, were you?
No, I wasn't.
You really could be our next big winner. Head over to gbnews.com/win now to find out how and get your entry for the Great British Giveaway. Great prizes, even greater wins.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very, very good evening to you. Welcome to GB News Tonight with me, your host, Martin Daubney. Coming up on the show tonight.
I know the president, I know myself, and I believe Vladimir Putin wants to see it ended.
Could there be peace at last? The moment is here and the world stands on a precipice. As next, European leaders arrive at the White House for the summits that could be what brings Europe to peace, ending the 3.5-year war in Ukraine. We'll be going stateside in just a moment to debate whether this is a masterclass or a blunder for Donald J. Trump. Meanwhile, back in the UK, shock new polling reveals that 90% of the public supports deporting foreign sex offenders. And I'll be joined by someone on the front line in the fight against migrant crime. Plus, I'll be joined by the man who revealed the mainstream media Farage fact-check fumble as Sky News admits it was completely wrong about the number of sex offences committed by Afghans. And on tonight's show, I'll also be joined by GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson. And I'll put this to you tonight. Is tonight the night when European leaders were proved utterly pointless, complete bit players before the watershed, spare part at a wedding? Donald Trump doing a deal with Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron et al. Sat in a corridor, sidelined, absolutely impotent in the fight for peace. That's coming on tonight's show, but first it's time for your latest news headlines.
Martin, thank you, and good evening to you. Just after 7 o'clock, well, seated side by side in the Oval Office, Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy have just faced reporters in Washington. Donald Trump calling it an honour to host the Ukrainian president and insisted that progress is being made to end the war. He also hinted his recent talks with Vladimir Putin offered, he said, a good possibility something could come out of it. The Ukrainian president thanks Donald Trump, but underlined Ukraine's ultimate goal was simple: to stop the war. And pressed on whether US peacekeepers could be sent to Ukraine, Trump sidestepped, saying America will work with Ukraine to secure peace. Well, take a listen to what he had to say.
We're going to have a lasting peace. Just to answer the first part of your question, have a lasting peace. I hope it's going to be immediately. I hope it doesn't have to go on. And I think people of the whole world is going to be very happy when that's announced.
With Sir Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron and other world leaders also gathering in Washington at the White House, Trump teased earlier a possible trilateral meeting with Russia and Ukraine, telling reporters gathered if everything works out well, he said, it won't be the end of the road. We were also hearing from Moscow in the last half hour or so, turning its fire on Britain in a statement, accusing the UK of being, quote, obsessed with raising the stakes in Ukraine and pushing NATO partners to a dangerous brink, beyond which, they say, a new global conflict is not far away. Here, pubs are vanishing from Britain's streets at a rapid pace, with 8 shutting for good every week in the first half of this year. Official figures show 209 pubs were demolished or converted by June, as raising taxes, higher wages and business rates take their toll. Industry leaders call the closures heartbreaking, and they're urging the Treasury to deliver tax relief in the autumn budget. 100 NHS diagnostic centres in England are now open 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. The move aims to cut waiting times and speed up diagnoses, with more than 7 million checks and scans carried out in July. Care Minister Stephen Kinnock told GB News the changes will help thousands of patients get seen sooner.
Play a vitally important role in terms of maximising access for people. So if it's open 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, even people with busy working lives can very rapidly get an appointment. They have the whole spectrum of diagnostics, from MRI scans to CAT scans to X-rays, and it's going to really help because they're embedded in communities. They're in your local shopping centre, maybe in your local university.
The Chancellor is considering a property tax overhaul, replacing stamp duty with a new property on tax on homes sold for more than £500,000. The Treasury proposal, still at an early stage, could also pave the way for reform of council tax, which is currently based on 1990s property values. Rachel Reeves says those changes would aim to boost fairness and raise revenue without breaking Labour's pledge not to increase taxes on working people. And the mother of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell, shot dead in her own home in Liverpool, is urging communities to speak out against gun crime. Her death was the 3rd fatal shooting in a week on Merseyside. Now, Olivia's mother Cheryl and other bereaved families are working with the group Evolve to reclaim neighbourhoods worst hit by serious and organised crime. 3 years on, Cheryl says the pain is indescribable and that no other family should suffer the same.
I think one of the biggest successes of the Evolve project has been the 300% increase in community intelligence from our communities. That is obviously really significant because it means the communities do have more confidence in the police now. They're coming forward, they're telling the police, or Crime Stoppers or whatever route they're using, they're telling them what's going on, and that means the police can take action against these criminals that are causing this harm. So I think that's a really positive narrative in terms of the relationships that have been built between the police and the community since then.
That's it from me from the newsroom for now. Let's head over to Martin for more on the news coming out of Washington.
Welcome back to GB News Tonight with me, your host, Martin Dorby. Now, moments ago, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, held those historic talks with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the White House amidst the proposed peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. And perhaps most shockingly of all, he seemingly undermined the European leaders' call for a ceasefire.
Will there be severe consequences? Does that change because
I don't think you need a ceasefire. You know, if you look at the 6 deals that I settled this year, they were all at war. I didn't do any ceasefires. And I know that it might be good to have, but I can also understand strategically why, well, you know, one country or the other wouldn't want it. You have a ceasefire and they rebuild and rebuild and rebuild, and, you know, maybe they don't want that. But if you look at the 6 deals that we made peace and you know, long-term, long-running wars, I didn't do any ceasefires. Would I like the concept, you know, I like the concept of a ceasefire for one reason, because you'd stop killing people immediately, as opposed to in 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever it takes. But we can work a deal where we're working on a peace deal while they're fighting. They have to fight. I wish they could stop. I'd like them to stop. But strategically, that could be a disadvantage for one side or the other. But all of these deals I made without even the mention of the words ceasefire.
Well, there we go. And now I'm joined by GB News' Homeland Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome back. We spent 3 hours between 3 and 6 discussing what's the point of the European Union leaders, what's the point of Keir Starmer's demands. They were puffing up their chests, saying we want a ceasefire, we want NATO membership for Ukraine. Donald Trump was Donald Trump. He flicked it away with a flick of the wrist and said, no, that's not going to happen. Mark White, as we speak, those same EU leaders queuing up to meet Donald Trump. Is this proof positive? They're completely immaterial in terms of this deal.
Well, I think you were right to play that particular clip. I think that it was the most significant element of what was said there by Donald Trump, that acknowledgement of what we had all suspected after the get-together with Vladimir Putin on Friday, when prior to that meeting, there was a key demand of a ceasefire or the threat of renewed sanctions on Russia. And then afterwards, no real talk of that still being the threat or the demand that the US president was seeking. And now proof positive from the president's own words there in the Oval Office that he has been persuaded by Vladimir Putin that actually the way to progress this situation is to have the negotiations while there is no ceasefire, because the thinking, it seems, of Vladimir Putin is that that is more of an incentive to do something, to agree on tangible outcomes more quickly. I think the Russian leader had feared that a ceasefire would simply allow one side or the other not really to make much in the way of any progress, knowing that a cessation of violence had taken place and it could be dragged out for a very long time indeed with no meaningful outcome. So the Russian leader, and now it seems the US president, has been persuaded that actually to continue the fighting puts renewed impetus on the negotiations to come up with some tangible results. But having said that, all of that could become null and void in the next hour or so, depending on what Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Donald Trump agree to at that meeting together, because it will be at that point that Volodymyr Zelenskyy will decide whether there are elements that he can work with in what Russia are proposing. If he feels that some of the demands to give back some tracts of land, for instance, are just not something that he can put to the Ukrainian people, that is just not doable, then we don't go any further. You heard it there from Donald Trump. The fighting will just continue. It's back to square one, effectively. But we just won't know, and we won't know what the input of those European leaders who've travelled to Washington will be until Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Donald Trump emerge from that meeting. Because either the European leaders will be asked for input into how they can constructively progress the negotiations in what are being termed a trilateral, which of course means Russia, Ukraine and the US. Doesn't involve the European leaders, but they may have some input into what's decided. Or, failing that, if Volodymyr Zelenskyy is not willing to go forward to a trilateral meeting, then the European leaders, those allies of Ukraine, are going to have to step up to the mark and put their money where their mouth is, saying that they've got Ukraine's back. Well, for how long? Because if the US pulls back, then it's all on those European leaders to continue to support Ukraine for potentially a very long time.
Well, Mark White, the optics so different to what we saw in February. Volodymyr Zelenskyy tonight was suited, but he didn't get booted. It wasn't the car crash that we saw back in February, quite muted. I think maybe just want to get through it unscathed. And I just thought the optics were so interesting there, Mark White, of those flags on that empty podium. We're awaiting that family photograph, of course, of those EU leaders. One side US. The other side of the stage, the European Union flag. Poles apart, worlds apart. Mark, I think the optics on these things are important. And of course, Donald Trump outspoken in his contempt for the European Union, and they got perhaps the worst deal of all on the entire continent in those 15% tariffs.
Yes, we know there's, been no love lost between Donald Trump and the European Union on what, of course, Donald Trump has accused the European Union and European countries of effectively taking the US for a ride or for mugs over the years with the way in which they have slapped taxes on US imports, but of course the opposite has not worked in terms of European goods going to the US. To go back to what you were saying about that chat with Vladimir Zelenskyy and President Trump, it was very clear that both men determined that there would not be an acrimonious end to that particular get-together. They were falling over each other to be polite, and I thought there was one very amusing moment when the reporter, who was the reporter that had really just laid into Vladimir Zelenskyy initially back in February, criticising him for the way he was dressed and accusing him of showing a lack of respect, said to Vladimir Zelenskyy, "You're looking very smart tonight." And I thought Vladimir Zelenskyy was very quick in saying back to him, "I see you're still wearing the same suit."
Absolutely right. A little bit of humour in a very, very serious moment. Mark White, you've been superb as ever all day. Thank you very, very much for joining us on GB News tonight. Now let's move on now. I'm joined by my two next guests. That's the DC Bureau Chief at the Daily Wire, Tim Rice, as well as the American political analyst, Eric Ham. Gentlemen, welcome. Tim Rice, I'm going to start with you. There was one clear victor tonight, and it was Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a big day here in Washington. I think, the president has been clear about one thing since the campaign, since his first term, and that it's he wants to see an end to this war in Ukraine. And though he's changed his tune a little bit on, as you mentioned, President Zelenskyy and also on President Putin, the one thing that he has been consistent in saying is that he wants to bring an end to this war. And I think today was a very important and meaningful step in that direction.
And let's bring you in now, Eric Ham. Eric, a continued request of a lot of players on the world stage, particularly in the European Union, and dare I say Sir Keir Starmer, was there must be a ceasefire. And Donald Trump saying, I don't think we need a ceasefire. I like the concept. You stop killing people, but we can still have a peace deal while they fight on. What's your take on that?
Well, if Donald Trump is the winner, so too is Vladimir Putin. And of course, we know the losers are Ukraine and the rest of Europe, because this war continues, which means Vladimir Putin continues to make those incremental advances on the battlefield and continues to annex parts of Ukraine. And we know, of course, the biggest prize in all of this certainly is the Donbas region, the industrial heart of Ukraine, which Vladimir Putin has made clear to Donald Trump. That's the section of the country that he so desperately wants. And so today he will continue to attempt to try to cede that territory for himself. And with no ceasefire, as they continue to play this and process out, this allows Vladimir Putin to continue to fight, and it gives him a crucial delay that he needs to continue to make those advances, even while we see more killing overnight with airstrikes from Russia.
Tim Rice, could I ask you a question which brings me no great contentment at all? Are we seeing the sun setting on Europe as a global power? And particularly, we talk about the special relationship. Of course, we have a huge bond of history, a band of brothers, a bond of blood. But I'm sensing now that the special relationship is kind of fading away. Donald Trump doing a deal with Ukraine, Europe utterly sidelined today.
I see where you're coming from, but I think there's cause to be more optimistic about the future of the special relationship. The president and Prime Minister Starmer have certainly gotten along well. And I think that while, yes, the optics certainly made it seem like European leaders were being sidelined, I don't think that was necessarily a bad thing. Today's meeting showed that President Trump was willing to sit down with President Zelenskyy after the debacle back in February, just like he was willing to sit down with President Putin. The Ukrainians and President Zelenskyy have made it clear that they want the United States involvement. And today showed President Trump was willing to do it himself without European intermediaries, without warring factions in Congress. This is not about our domestic politics. This is not about Ukrainian domestic politics. This is about bringing an end to this war. This is two leaders sitting down in a high-profile meeting. I think, perhaps today wasn't the day for all the members of the EU. Maybe today was not the day for the special relationship to take center stage, but I don't think that just because the president is doing what so many of his predecessors have done and serving as the intermediary between two warring global powers, I don't think that necessarily means this is the end of Europe as we know it.
Eric Ham, the president, saved chagrin, as usual, for members of the critical media. He was asked, do you think the US media don't even want peace? And of course, the intimation there is that no matter what Donald Trump does, the anti-Trump media in America will despise him. He could solve world peace. He could cure cancer. He could get rid of global famine. He would still be hated by the media. And he said, we have terrible people here. I get the worst publicity ever. He said that this was a great deal for Putin to come to Alaska, and he wants peace. Why don't the media?
Well, I think if Donald Trump were to do any of those things, I think we might see a massive sea change in terms of the narrative by the press and the media. However, I think the fact that he allowed an international war criminal on U.S. soil and got nothing in return for it simply doesn't go anyways in actually affording the president the adoration and adulation that he would like. Nevertheless, what we continue to see is a war where Russia continues to encroach and invade a sovereign nation and also continues to ignore a sovereign elected leader of a democratic nation. And what all of Europe and, of course, most of the West want, even those here in the United States, is to see an end to the war and to see somehow a president actually push back against a Russian strongman.
Eric, if I may interject, it seems to be that the only peace can be a peace that's entirely in favour of Ukraine, and that just isn't going to happen. Zelenskyy himself admits now there has to be, for right or for wrong, in his eyes clear for wrong, there has to be a surrender of some sovereign territory for this to end. Plan B, Eric Ham, many people have said all along, is a continued bloody war where thousands of men are sent into the meat grinder every week. In war, there has to be compromise, surely.
Well, there has to be compromise, but again, where's the compromise on the invaders themselves? Russia has not ceded anything. More importantly, I think if we're going to talk about Europe, there is a lot that Europe can do right now. If you take all of those seized assets and resources that they have taken from Russia, they could actually provide that to Ukraine immediately, which would allow the Ukraine to be able to purchase weaponry both from the United States as well as Europe to continue to defend itself. In addition to that, I think what we're seeing right now is this is becoming an increasingly one-sided effort where you have President Donald Trump appearing to come across as a talking point and a valet for Moscow. And that's just not the place where you typically see the United States play or actually become a role.
Tim Rice, Donald Trump was asked by the media how much more money will be given because, of course, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars have gone into this war since its beginning. The same from the United Kingdom, by the way, not on the same amount. Of course, America has been the lion's share of the contribution. And Donald Trump says we're not giving anything anymore. We're selling weapons to NATO, of course, which then get sold to Ukraine. So is there an argument for the fact that Donald Trump is making money out of the war continuing?
I don't think there's really an argument for that. I think the fact is the president made it clear today that he is willing to commit in some way to defending Ukraine, right? Whether it's an Article 5 defense under NATO, he sort of demurred on the question of American troops. I think that in trying to stop the tide of giveaways, perhaps he is trying to appeal a little bit to the Russians to try to bring Vladimir Putin to the table. But I do think it's a mistake to think that Trump dealing with Vladimir Putin means that Trump is conceding to Vladimir Putin or serving as his mouthpiece. The fact of the matter is Vladimir Putin has been, on for most of the past quarter century, the head of state in Russia. He is an ex-KGB officer who sees himself as rebuilding the Soviet age of grandeur in Russia and Eastern Europe. He has personally said that if it takes 30 years for him to secure the Donbas region alone, that is but a drop in the bucket in Russia's grand imperial history. This man is going to continue to, as you said, put men through the meat grinder, his own men and Ukrainian men. He has seen 5 presidents come and go out of this White House. He will likely see more. So short of going in there and completely upending the Russian regime and trying to pull Putin, somebody at some point is going to have to deal with Vladimir Putin. And I think it's good that that person is Donald Trump.
And Eric Ham, isn't that the point? When you try and get inside the mindset of Vladimir Putin, which is a curious and perhaps dangerous thing to do, we saw with that astonishing interview with Tucker Carlson, these are people that think in glacial ages, in epochs, in centuries. And I think Tim Rice hits a point there. Vladimir Putin saw it perhaps as Russia's destiny to take these parts of Ukraine back. Now, you can argue with justification, that's a terrible thing for Ukraine. But when you have people that think in that context, is not calling an end to this just the right thing to do now?
Well, again, if you call an end to it, then where does this end, and what does that do for all of Europe? And I think if we allow, if Europe and Ukraine are pushed to capitulate to Vladimir Putin, where does it end? I mean, we have seen some of the dastardly deeds done by Putin, even on U.S. soil. In fact, it was the U.S. intelligence that believes that he meddled in U.S. elections, and who's to say he won't do that again? And so I think what we have seen is a United States that for nearly a century has stood up to tyranny. And I think what you're seeing right now is something very different.
Okay, Eric Ham, I think all that Putin interfering in the election has been widely discredited. But look, gentlemen, there was, of course, a huge blistering attack on Joe Biden. It wouldn't be a Donald Trump press conference without one. Let's take a listen.
This isn't my war. This is Joe Biden's war. He's the one that had a lot to do with this happening, and we want to get it ended. And we want it to end good for everybody. We want it to end good. The people of Ukraine have suffered incredibly.
So, Tim Rice, let's come to you. Of course, Joe, Donald Trump there claiming victory for the 6th war he's ended. Biden was a horrible, corrupt president. In that sense, business as usual tonight.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. As you said, it wouldn't be a Donald Trump press conference without taking at least a short victory lap around President Biden. But I do think that comment, jabbing as it is, does get to an important fact, and a fact that Trump has certainly not been shy about pointing out, which is that this actually goes back even before Joe Biden. This goes back to the second Obama administration when Putin moved on Crimea in 2014. This has been going on for at least over a decade now, right? Not Ukraine has been 3 years, but Putin's attempts to extend into other territory has been going on since the two Democratic presidents ago. And, obviously there's a little bit of the president is going to try to claim victory and say that he ended the war. But it is an important thing, I think, to remember as we talk about, right? This goes beyond just presidential terms. This goes beyond American politics. This goes beyond the way we think about things. This is Vladimir Putin's been there that long, and he is willing to dig in for the long haul.
And Eric Ham, isn't that a great point there that Tim Rice raises? When Russia moved in and annexed the Crimea when Obama was the president, barely a peep out of him. Cat had got his tongue. The Democrat media completely silent on the issue. And yet here we are now, Donald Trump, the bad guy.
Well, Donald Trump is president. And so now the question becomes, now that you have
Obama was
American might and prestige, what do you do with it? Do you simply stand idly by and watch a Russian strongman continue this? Or do you stand up to him? I don't think we've seen Donald Trump do that. And say what you will about Biden or Obama, I don't think either one of them rolled out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin in the way that we've seen Donald Trump do so.
Eric Ham, the point that Tim Rice raises, the point I'm reiterating, is that when the same happened, Vladimir Putin took over the Crimea when Barack Obama was the president. He didn't stand up to him. He didn't push back. He just simply stood by and let it happen.
And now the question becomes, now that Donald Trump is president, now that Vladimir Putin is doing the exact same thing, what do we see from this president? Capitulation. So basically more of the same.
So you agree then that Barack Obama capitulated over the Crimea?
Are we talking about Barack Obama, or are we talking about the current commander-in-chief?
Well, I'm asking you to be equally critical of Democrats and Republicans if think they've made a mistake.
Well, I think what I'm focusing on is where we are right now. You've got a president in the White House. You've got all of Europe looking to the United States to do something. And I think we have seen the former president, Joe Biden, do that in terms of rallying Europe against Putin, and as well as providing weapons to Ukraine to the tune of billions of dollars. And now the question becomes, what is this president going to do that's any different, or to stand up to Vladimir Putin, which is what we have not seen from him?
OK, thank you very much, gentlemen. An excellent analysis there. That's a DC Bureau Chief at the Daily Wire, Tim Rice, and always pleasure, American political analyst Eric Ham. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much indeed. Now, I'm joined in the studio. It is Monday night by the senior political commentator at GBNews, Nigel Nelson. Nigel, you've been very patiently waiting throughout all of that. What's your take on today's affairs?
Well, I mean, first of all, look at Zelensky's language. What he's talking about now is a frozen conflict. It's just another way of describing a ceasefire. It is obviously in Putin's interest to not have a ceasefire and to carry on taking territory. So when they finally do a deal over land, Putin has got the most territory to negotiate with. Zelensky wants the front lines frozen where they are at the moment, and then you discuss territory, which seems to be a much more sensible way round it. The question is, after he's talked to President Trump, what comes out of that? Whether or not we're back on the line that we get the fighting stopped, and then we discuss territory.
Do you think there'll be a peace in this war that Trump's critics will ever be happy with, because Trump secured the peace deal?
Well, it depends what it is. I mean, at the moment, peace is not in sight, but it does feel like it's just over the horizon. And because it's over the horizon, we don't know what it looks like. So it rather depends where Trump actually goes next. At the moment, all he's done is appease Putin. So on the basis...
Ending wars, they take give and take. I mean, we can argue...
Of course they do, and that's the point. It's a question of how you get there. What Putin wanted when he went to Alaska was some extra time. What he got was that extra time. Trump went into that meeting demanding a ceasefire, and he left it saying, forget about ceasefires, we'll talk about settlements. Settlements will take time, and that's exactly what Putin wanted.
But a lot of people in the liberal West, certainly a lot of people in Britain, perhaps even Sir Keir Starmer himself and Emmanuel Macron and Ursula von der Leyen, they seem to want this war to go on. They want NATO to offer membership. That's a red line from presidents of Russia way back to Gorbachev. Now, joining NATO was always something that actually, when perestroika came out, was a complete no-go area. Suddenly it's back on the table. Are the European Union and Sir Keir Starmer actually helping, or are they warmongering?
Well, bear in mind that as far as Europe's concerned, we are also in the front line, that in the event that Ukraine falls and Putin then decides to go for another European country, a NATO country, we are in really deep trouble. So from Europe's point of view, we've got to get that sorted out. On the NATO question, the way I would see that being resolved is not to actually ban Ukraine's membership of NATO, but kick it in the long grass. I can see that Russia will not go along with the idea of having another 1,200 miles of NATO border on its border, which is actually what would happen if Ukraine joined. So you can get around these things diplomatically. Just keep it going for a bit longer.
OK, we're about to have that family photograph, as they call it. You can see live pictures on your screen there from the White House, the various flags of the nations laid across there. Nigel Nelson, I think there's no coincidence at all that on one end of that stage you've got the US Stars and Stripes, at the polar opposite, right down there in the corner, is the flag of the European Union. Everything is about optics, and that, to me, says that America and the European Union have never been further apart.
No, you may be right. I mean, it may well be that is no accident that the European flag is actually where it is. Trump has made it perfectly clear he hasn't got much time for the EU, and so sticking the flag right at the end might be his way of insulting it. I mean, that would be a typical Trumpian type thing to do. At the end of it all, the EU has got to be part of this negotiation.
Why?
Because Ukraine wants membership of the EU.
Well, they won't get that.
No, they probably won't. And again,
they don't meet the economic criteria. They're one of the most corrupt nations on the planet. They're a war zone. Why on earth? It's nonsense to suggest that the way forward is to incorporate Ukraine in the European Union.
Well, I mean, it's much more important for Ukraine to get membership of NATO, and I think that is going to be some time off. But the issue at the moment is, if you can just stop that fighting, if you can get Putin to hold the line where he is, then you might be able to start talking about the real meat of this, and that is who gets what land.
Okay, Nigel Nelson, thank you for joining us as ever. Now, in a short moment's time, we'll be continuing our coverage of that Ukraine summit at the White House, and also there's plenty more of other stories yet to come. You're not going to want to miss out. Wait around for that big photograph between Trump and the so-called European family.
Good evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow, similar to today, quite a lot of cloud around, but most of us dry and bright with some sunshine here and there. And again, 1 or 2 showers in the southwest, close by to this area of low pressure. Further north, high pressure is in control, bringing, as I said, a lot of dry weather, but also bringing a lot of cloud. And the cloud just pushing back inland as we go through the night, smothering much of the country by the time we get to dawn. Parts of western Scotland, Northern Ireland staying clear. In southwest England, South Wales, just the threat of 1 or 2 showers keeping going as well. Temperatures mostly holding up in the teens. For Tuesday then, it does start pretty drab. Maybe the cloud thick enough for a little bit of drizzle here and there around the coast of eastern Scotland, northeast England. Still a possibility of 1 or 2 showers across Devon and Cornwall. I think we'll see a few more of those developing through the day. Quite cloudy to begin with over much of East Wales, a good part of England. The thickest cloud close to these North Sea coasts, or as I say, there may be a bit of drizzle. Some brighter spells across the west of Northern Ireland and the west coast of Scotland, like today, should be favoured for a bit of blue sky and some sunshine coming through here. Elsewhere, though, sunshine may take a while to come through, and parts of the east coast with this breeze coming in from the North Sea likely to stay pretty drab. Elsewhere, well, the cloud may break up a little bit, but overall I think it will be quite a cloudy day, and particularly in the southwest, Devon, Cornwall seeing 1 or 2 scattered but potentially heavy showers through the day. With a bit of brightness, we should see the temperatures climbing into the mid-20s along the south coast of England, but generally feeling quite cool, especially on these North Sea coasts where that breeze will again be present on Wednesday. Again, starting quite cloudy for most, but I'm a bit more optimistic for more in the way of blue sky and a bit more sunshine coming through by Wednesday. A fresher feel, though, temperatures not as high. Cool on those eastern coasts inland with some sunshine, low 20s.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Tonight with me, your host tonight, Martin Daubin. And here's a short reminder of what we witnessed moments ago when President Donald Trump seemingly undermined his European counterparts by completely dismissing the idea of a ceasefire in negotiations between Russia and Ukraine.
Will there be severe consequences? Does that change because
I don't think you need a ceasefire. You know, if you look at the 6 deals that I settled this year, they were all at war. I didn't do any ceasefires. And I know that it might be good to have, but I can also understand strategically why, well, you know, one country or the other wouldn't want it. You have a ceasefire and they rebuild and rebuild and rebuild, and, you know, maybe they don't want that. But if you look at the 6 deals that we made peace and you know, long-term, long-running wars, I didn't do any ceasefires. Would I like the concept, you know, I like the concept of a ceasefire for one reason, because you'd stop killing people immediately, as opposed to in 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever it takes. But we can work a deal where we're working on a peace deal while they're fighting. They have to fight. I wish they could stop. I'd like them to stop. But strategically, that could be a disadvantage for one side or the other. But all of these deals I made without even the mention of the words ceasefire.
And the Ukrainian leader's sense of fashion was once again questioned. Remember last time he was suited, not suited, and he got booted for it. But tonight they teased him in a bit more of a light-hearted manner.
President Zelenskyy, you look fabulous in that suit.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, you look good.
I said the same thing. The one that attacked you last time. See, now he's I remember that.
I apologize to you. You look wonderful. President Zelenskyy.
In the same suit. You see, I changed, you are not.
What a difference a press conference makes. In February, it was an utter car crash. Tonight, it was a completely different kettle of fish. I'm joined now in the studio by GBNews' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson, and now the new editorial director of Guido Fawkes, formerly of this parish, GBNews' former Adam Cherry. Adam, welcome to the studio. You're now unleashed.
Didn't take long, only 2 weeks. We're back though, aren't we?
You can now be yourself and give us your full political because, of course, you're clear of GB News' well-known impartiality rules.
I'm sure we'll be fine.
Cherry, let's talk about what's gone on tonight. And I specifically wanted to talk about two things. Let's start with the European Union. They'd been sat in that corridor outside, and what top of their list, chief pecking order, was they want to cease fire. Donald Trump in that press conference said there won't be one.
Yeah, he said it doesn't, it says normatively it'd be a good thing, but it's not necessary. And actually, that's also, I was in the Downing Street briefing today, and that's basically what, agreeing with what the Europeans said, that's what Number 10 said they wanted as of this morning as well. They said ultimately it's down to the Ukrainians, but they wanted to see a ceasefire. Nonetheless, they don't really, like you're alluding to, they don't really have any say in this. I mean, they can have the photo later as they will, but the real power players are obviously Ukraine and Russia and the US and everyone. I think everything else is sort of window dressing. OK, boots on the ground. I'm sure we'll talk about that from the coalition of the willing, from the UK, if and when some sort of peace deal is agreed. But getting to that point, I think it's fair to say those guys aren't the real power brokers here.
The coalition of the willing or the coalition of the utterly pointless?
Well, it's just NATO. It's just NATO without America. Like I think my former colleague Tom Howard said, that's sort of what it is. But NATO is nothing without America, is it?
When we look at the optics on that stage there, Adam Cherry, I think there is huge significance in where those flags are placed. Not an accident. But I think at on the one end of the stage there, you've got the stars and stripes, and right down the other end, you've got Ursula von der Leyen almost on the naughty step. And I think, Donald Trump said in that tariff negotiation, he compared them to the mafia, to racketeers. And the optics of this, I think, is yet more ritual punishment for the European Union.
Yeah, I mean, he's had, like you said, he's had serial disagreements with the Europeans. At least it's slightly tangential, but I suppose you could argue the UK has a slightly better position on this because of his sort of cultural affiliation with the country, and therefore perhaps he'll listen to Starmer a little bit more, maybe. But like I said, ultimately, these guys are just here for the show. They're just here to see what happens, like we were. They were basically just watching the same thing we were watching and seeing how it played out.
Can I ask you about one of my previous contributors, Eric Ham? He's a Democrat-leaning journalist. And I pointed out to him, I think quite fairly, when Vladimir Putin basically annexed, took over, invaded, just took the Crimea in 2014 when Barack Obama was the president. Nothing. Silence, an impotent response. And Barack Obama got a Nobel Peace Prize.
He got a Nobel Peace Prize in 2009, I think very shortly after he'd even come into office in his first term and done very little either way because it was so early. 2014, by that point, he'd sort of proven that his foreign policy credentials, I think it's fair to say, from my perspective, were pretty weak. Like you said, nothing happened there in 2014. That, you could argue, I think quite strongly, that emboldened Putin leading up to 2022, alongside other things like the Afghanistan withdrawal, but that was under Biden. I think you can make a very, very strong case for that. Not also, bear in mind as well, these red lines that he drew in Syria, the Obama administration drew in Syria, and then they were crossed, and nothing happened there either. So I think Putin watched that rather than watch the Biden administration afterwards, and I think it informed his thinking.
Nigel Nelson, is there anything in this notion that the timeline of weakness, if you like, of capitulation, of impotence from the West can be traced back to the Crimean annexation, the takeover, and if America responded then, perhaps the Ukraine war would never have come to pass.
Yes, I think that's probably right. Also, it applies to our leaders too. I mean, that David Cameron, who was Prime Minister then, he was pretty impotent as well. We allowed Russia to take Crimea.
But all of those people you're mentioning there have been queuing up to have a pop at Donald Trump, but they stood by and watched.
Yes, they did. And I mean, I think that one of the reasons for that was that it was the centenary of the start of the First World War. We were bombarded by books, documentaries, and so on, and it showed how easy it was to go from a small incident to World War in 36 days. That was the lesson that people learned there, and I think that there was that feeling, if they took part in stopping Putin in the Crimea, that could lead to a much wider conflict.
Or the counterpoint to that is if you stand by and allow a tyrant to do what they want, then you're inviting disaster.
I go for that one. I think they should have stopped him there, and this then may not have happened.
I suppose they would argue, well, what would that actually look like? And don't forget, in 2014, the legacy of the Iraq War and its consequences loomed over foreign policy thinking in the US. One of the reasons Obama was elected, I think, was in opposition to that sort of war, getting troops out, not being too hawkish, not being well, obviously Obama was never going to be a neocon in the first place, but the point is that the whole foreign policy thinking was in a very, very different place then. And in actual fact, it was Hillary Clinton, who was Secretary of State at the time, who I think took a big red button to Russia, to the then president, I might be getting to the then president Medvedev, and said, look, here's the new start, press this button and we'll reset relations. So it was in a very, very different place at the time, you could argue. Nonetheless, I think since they've been proven that they were wrong to take that strategy, I think you could also say that.
Let's get back to this family photo on the stage here. I think we're expecting that. Is that going to happen in this hour? That's happening soon?
It was meant to happen about half an hour ago.
So they're obviously like...
So they're well behind schedule at the moment.
Perhaps, though, Nigel Nelson, they're still in a state of shock. We saw a photograph of them all sitting in the corridor at the White House, almost like waiting to get the cane from the headmaster. They were sat there listening, clearly, in real time, as we all did, to Donald Trump saying there will be no ceasefire, a key demand. Left out in the cold, left out in the corridor, the coalition of the pointless.
Well, I think that Europe has an important part to play. They're there at the moment to back up Zelenskyy and, if you like, hold his coat while he's actually dealing with President Trump. But I don't think they're totally impotent, but I don't like the way that they keep flattering Donald Trump. They've moved away from the ceasefire, which was the most obvious way of going forward, and yet now they're on Trump's side, and they shouldn't be.
OK, Nigel, Adam, thank you very, very much. We're going to go to a short break now. We're going to get Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg in the studio. He, of course, is doing the State of the Nation next. I want to get his take on this tonight, because I think we've just witnessed the dying embers of the European Union, utterly pointless on the world stage. That's next.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
The heat isn't quite as intense as it has been across parts of Europe, but nonetheless it is still hot and sunny for many Mediterranean areas, and indeed across the Canary Islands and Madeira, fine and very warm here. The heat's still there across Iberia though, so some very high temperatures here. A few thunderstorms for southern France and across inland parts of Italy, but mostly sunny in coastal parts. And Greece and Turkey will stay largely fine, sunny and very warm over the next few days, with lots of sunshine and temperatures in the low 30s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real.
Welcome back. Now let's get over to DC. I believe the European leaders are being marched out for their so-called family photograph. There we have it. Right down one end, the diminutive Ursula von der Leyen. Next to him, of course, it is Sir Keir Starmer. Then we have Mark Rutte. Then we have Volodymyr Zelenskyy there next to Donald Trump in the centre. Emmanuel Macron, the de facto leader, you'd like to think, of the continent of Europe, right next to Donald Trump. And moving along, Giorgia Meloni, the Premier of Italy. We have Friedrich Merz there, and that is the Chancellor of Germany. On the end there, Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, smiling still like the cat who got the cream. How much money is he going to get out of this deal? Central figures there tonight, look, though, definitely Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy at this so-called team photograph. Joining the studio, the quick handshake there. Joined in the studio by Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. Sir Jacob, shuffling off there. Ursula von der Leyen, look, looking forlorn, looking lonely, looking kind of pointless on the end. Sir Jacob, I've been saying all day, this feels to me, to quote Douglas Murray, like the strange death of Europe, but the strange death of European leaders.
I think it's quite humiliating that the European leaders, I'm afraid including us, have had absolutely nothing to do. They have flown out for a photograph. All the decision-making is being made by Donald Trump. President Zelenskyy may be getting some involvement in it. Putin clearly is getting involvement in it. But I'm afraid the EU, the President of France, the Chancellor of Germany, the British Prime Minister are also rounds. This is not 19th century Council of Vienna. This is not the 20th century, the Versailles Conference. It is presidential power being exercised by Donald Trump, and people, when he says jump, have to say how high. And the question is, what's so worrying about this is, has he got it right? We don't know. It's very difficult to read the rooms at this stage as to whether something really important is happening or whether this is one of the biggest failures of Western foreign policy in decades, if not the best part of a century. And I just don't know what the right judgment is at the moment.
So, Jacob, optics, I think, are important. How many times we saw Theresa May just annexed, a lonely, forlorn figure at those European Union conferences when we were going for Brexit. Ursula von der Leyen there, looking very much like a bolt-on, forlorn, forgotten.
Well, the European Union doesn't have a role in this. It doesn't have any troops. It doesn't represent the smaller countries. The Finnish were represented directly. Any country that needed direct representation was directly represented. The Germans and the French, the paymasters of Europe, were there directly, and we, thank heavens, are no longer members. So she's there as the bureaucrat-in-chief. I mean, she's the... It's like having the Clerk of the House of Commons there, I mean, who I happen to think is a wonderful man, but is not somebody you want running your foreign policy.
With replay of that so-called family photo a short while ago there. Centre stage, of course, Donald Trump, Volodymyr Zelenskyy next to him. Emmanuel Macron doing his best to stand tall. Maybe he's got some height-boosting shoes on. He'll need them. Next to Donald Trump, there's Giorgia Meloni, of course, another one of Donald Trump's favourites. But Nigel Nelson, I want to bring you in here. Ursula von der Leyen, a German defence minister, so useless. Half the tanks didn't run. The aircraft couldn't get off the ground. Troops training with broomsticks. Who is she to go to Washington and talk to Donald Trump about how to end the war?
Well, she's president of the EU, and so the EU has a part to play. The EU is in the front line of this, in the sense that all the member countries, because all the member countries of the EU or Europe as a whole, is directly threatened by Putin. At the moment, Donald Trump is not threatened by Putin, but Europe is. That's why Europe has a part to play in it.
So we can just see on our screens now they're sat down for a long table meeting at in the office there, the White House, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. You were keen there to respond to Nigel's point.
I was. Forgive me for being pedantic, Nigel, but she is not the President of the European Union. She is President of the Commission. There is also a President of the Council of Ministers, and there is a President of the Parliament.
I was doing a shorthand.
Yeah, but it's very important because this is one of the areas where Europe falls down, that nobody speaks for the European Union. And when it comes to a really serious problem, all the individual countries speak for themselves, and that's what's happening now. It's a breakdown of the foreign affairs, foreign and defence pillar of the European Union.
Adam Sherry, to bring you in now. So we're about to start this meeting. You can see that long table, and again, Ursula von der Leyen right at the end of the table. She needs a megaphone to say, pass the salt.
Yeah, I mean, this is where they get their marching orders, isn't it? They, like I said earlier, they're just waiting to hear what happened in the room like the rest of us, really.
Hi, Mark.
They have no influence at all.
And I just think, Sir Jacob, are we seeing a new world order here? The European Union, Sir Keir Starmer, NATO, they can drum, they can march all they like.
To have you here.
Here's Donald Trump speaking. Why don't we listen to what Donald Trump has to say?
Special, no matter where you're from, represents so much, and it really is beautiful. And thank you for all of the wonderful things that took place today. We've had a very successful day thus far. Important discussions as we work to end the killing and stop the war in Ukraine. We're all working for the same goal, very simple goal. We want to stop the killing, get this settled. I've just had the honor of being with President Zelenskyy and all of the discussions that we've had. We covered a lot of territory, and I spoke indirectly with President Putin today. We're going to call President Putin right after this meeting. I'm sure we're going to have a solid meeting, good meeting, maybe a great meeting, and we're going to try and work out a trilat after that and see if we can get it finished, put this to sleep, because this is not since the Second World War has there been anything like this. So I'm honored to welcome NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who's a great gentleman, great political leader in Europe generally, but now he's the NATO Secretary General, and you're doing a fantastic job. Thank you very much, Mark. Prime Minister Starmer of the United Kingdom, our friend and my friend, and doing really well. And people like him a lot. We all like him. Everyone knows President Macron of France, who's been with me from the beginning, one of the first people I met as a foreign dignitary, and I liked him from day one. And I like him even more now. That's pretty good. That's unusual. That's a pretty unusual thing. Prime Minister Meloni of Italy, who's a really a great leader and an inspiration over there. She's served now, even though she's a very young person, she's served there for a long period of time relative to others. They don't last very long. You've lasted a long time. You're going to be there a long time. Chancellor Merz of Germany, who is a very strong person and a very strong leader and very highly respected in Germany. And he's my friend, and it's an honor to have him as my friend. Thank you very much. Very good. You look great with your tan. Where did you get that tan? I want to get a tan like that. That's true. President Stubb of Finland, and he's somebody that, where are we here? Where? I'm right here. Oh. You look better than I've ever seen you look. But you've done a great job, and we wanted to have you here because you're somebody that we all respect. And you've had a lot to do with the success, I think, and the potential success. And thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. And the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who is somebody that we just made a big deal with all of those countries. I don't know. I think you might be more powerful than all these guys at this table. I don't know. But we had a great negotiation, and you're respected all over the world. So I want to thank you very much for being here. It's a great honor to have you. The Alaska summit reinforced my belief that while difficult, peace is within reach, and I believe that in a very significant step, President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the key points that we need to consider, and we're going to be considering that at the table also, like who will do what, essentially. I'm optimistic that collectively we can reach an agreement that would deter any future aggression against Ukraine. And I actually think there won't be. I think that's even overrated, largely overrated, but we're going to find out. And I think that the European nations are going to take a lot of the burden. We're going to help them, and we're going to make it very secure. We also need to discuss the possible exchanges of territory, taking into consideration the current line of contact. That means the war zone, the war lines that are pretty obvious, very sad, actually, to look at them. And negotiating positions. President Putin, also, you have President of Ukraine, who is, you just met a little while ago, and we're going to try and get a three-party meeting, maybe as soon as we can. And I have a feeling you and President Putin are going to work something out. Ultimately, this is a decision that can only be made by President Zelenskyy and by the people of Ukraine working also together in agreement with President Putin. And I just think that's very good things are going to come of it. So I hope we have a good meeting. And if we can have a good meeting, I'll set up a meeting with President Putin. And if you'd like, I'll go to that meeting. And not that I want to do that, but I will do that because we want to save a lot of people from dying. A lot of people are dying, and we got to save them. Got to save it. 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people sometimes a week. All of us would obviously prefer an immediate ceasefire while we work on a lasting peace, and maybe something like that could happen. As of this moment, it's not happening, but President Zelenskyy and President Putin can talk a little bit more about that. You know, in the 6 or so wars that we stopped, we haven't had a ceasefire. And so I don't know that it's necessary. You can do it through the war, but it would be, I like the ceasefire from another standpoint. You immediately stop the killing. But I believe a peace agreement at the end of all of this is something that's very attainable, and it can be done in the near future. With all of the wars that I got involved in, we only have this one left. Of course, as I walk out the door, there'll probably be a new one starting, and I'll get that stopped too. But I thought this was going to be one of the easier ones. It's actually one of the most difficult. They're very complex. The next step would be for a trilateral meeting, and that will be worked out. And I just look forward to working and having a great result. We're going to spend a lot of time today talking about, and we're really honored you guys came over. I mean, these are the heads of major countries and respected all over Europe. And they speak for, largely, I think I should say, but pretty much for the other countries of Europe. And we will come to a resolution today, I think, on almost everything, including probably the security. And that's pretty much the story. I'd like to say, Mr. President, would you like to say something? You have the media. If you want, you could come over and you could stand, you could use mine, or you could just turn around, whichever you feel comfortable with.
Thank you so much. I can speak without microphone. Thank you so much. I think that we had very good conversation with President Trump.
Very good.
And it really was the best one. Or sorry, maybe the best one will be in the future. But it was really good. And we spoke about very sensitive points. The first one is security guarantees. And we are very happy with President that all the leaders are here, and the security in Ukraine depends on the United States and on you and on those leaders who are with us in our hearts. They have been online before yesterday, and etc. So a lot of countries on the side of Ukraine, our people, and all of us want to finish this war, stop Russia and stop this war. We spoke about it, and we will speak more about security guarantees. This is very important that the United States gives such strong signal and is ready for security guarantees. The second point, or maybe the first, the humanitarian direction, very important to exchange all the prisoners, and I think that President will help. And I was very thankful to your wife again, Mr. President, for the letter about our abducted children, and I hope that really it can be a historic role for the people to bring kids back to the families and be happy and
get the people back. Yeah.
Yes, this is so important, and I'm happy that we discussed it, this track with the President Trump, and I hope that we will find decisions. And then what is very important, that all the sensitive things, territorial, etc., we will discuss on the level of leaders during trilateral meeting, and President Trump will try to organize such meeting, and he said that he will come or not come. Ukraine will be happy if you
both
participate.
Want me there, I will be there. Yeah,
yeah,
you know that.
Thank you. And I think this is very important. Yes, so security guarantees, bringing kids back, and all our people, not only warriors, first of all warriors, and all the civilians, journalists, a lot of people in prison. So we need them back. And guarantees which will work for the years. We spoke about it, and I showed the President a lot of details on the battlefield, on the map. Thank you so much. Thank you for the map, by the way.
Good map.
It was great. Yeah. I'm thinking how to take it back.
We'll get you.
No. I think that we had constructive, specific meeting, and I'm very thankful to all the leaders who are here, and you help a lot, and so we are happy that we have such big unity today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much,
for hosting us.
Mr. President. I think you'll see that President Putin really would like to do something else. I think when we set that up, when we do, I think it's going to be when, not if. I think you're going to see some really positive moves. I know there's over 1,000 prisoners, and I know they're going to release them. Maybe they're going to release them very soon, like immediately, which I think is great. But we're going to set that up today after this meeting. So very good and great remarks. I appreciate it. Mark, as head of NATO, maybe you could say a few words, please.
Yes, I will be very brief. I really want to thank you, President of the United States, dear Donald, for the fact that you, as I said before, broke the deadlock, basically, with President Putin by starting that dialogue. And I think it was in February that you had the first phone call, and from there we are now where we are today. And that is, I think, if we play this well, we could end this. And we have to end this. We have to stop the killing. We have to stop the destruction of Ukraine's infrastructure. It is a terrible war, so I'm really excited. And let's make the best out of today and make sure that from today onwards we get this thing to an end as soon as possible. I really want to thank you for your leadership, what you are doing for Volodymyr, but of course also all the European colleagues. It is really crucial. And the fact that you have said I'm willing to participate in the security guarantees is a big step. Is really a breakthrough, and it makes all the difference. So also thank you for that.
Well, NATO also has agreed from 2% to 5%, which is something that is a massive amount of money. And it's 2% that wasn't always paid to 5% that is paid. That's a big difference. And so we appreciate that. That was a great move. Thank you very much. Ursula, maybe on behalf of the Commission, you could say a couple of words.
Yes. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's a very important moment. Indeed, we are here, Europeans, as friends and allies. We had a fantastic NATO summit. Together as the two largest and biggest economies in the world, we had the largest trade deal ever agreed. And now we are here to work together with you on a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. Stop the killing. This is really our common interest, stop the killing. And indeed, it's very good to hear that we're working on the security guarantees, Article 5 life security guarantees, so important. But I want to thank you also that you mentioned the thousands of Ukrainian children that have been abducted. And as a mother and grandmother, every single child has to go back to its family. This should be one of our main priorities also in these negotiations, to make sure that the children come back to Ukraine, to their families.
Thank you. And we did. I was just thinking we're here for a different reason, but we just a couple of weeks ago made the largest trade deal in history. So that's a big thing, and congratulations. That's great. Thank you very much, Ursula. Mr. Chancellor from Germany, a very great leader.
Mr. President,
Please.
dear Donald, many thanks for having us today. I think this is extremely helpful that we are meeting and hearing that the two of you are having such a good meeting today here in Washington. The next steps ahead are the more complicated ones now. The path is open. You opened it last Friday. But now the way is open for complicated negotiations. And to be honest, we all would like to see a ceasefire, the latest from the next meeting on. I can't imagine that the next meeting would take place without a ceasefire. So let's work on that, and let's try to put pressure on Russia, because the credibility of these efforts we are undertaking today are depending on at least a ceasefire from the beginning of the serious negotiations from next step on. So I would like to emphasize this aspect and would like to see a ceasefire from the next meeting, which should be a trilateral meeting wherever it takes place.
Well, we're going to let the president go over and talk to the president, and we'll see how that works out, and if we can do that. I will say, and again I say it, in the 6 wars that I've settled, I haven't had a ceasefire. We just got into negotiations, and one of the wars was, as you know, in the Congo was 31 years long. Another one that we settled last week with 2 great countries was 35 years going on, and we had no ceasefire. So if we can do the ceasefire, great. And if we don't do a ceasefire, because many other points were given to us, many points were given to us, great points. Please, Georgia, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Donald, Mr. President, for hosting us today in this important meeting. And I think it is an important day, a new phase, after 3 years and a half that we didn't see any kind of sign from the Russian side that there was a willing for dialogue. So something is changing, something has changed, thanks to you. Thanks also to the stalling in the battlefield, which was achieved with the bravery of Ukrainians and with the unity that we all provided to Ukraine. And the reason why I mention it is that we also have to remind that if we want to reach peace and if we want to guarantee justice, we have to do it united. So that's why it's a very good day, the one we are in. You can obviously count on Italy as it was from the beginning. We are on the side of Ukraine, and we do absolutely support your efforts towards peace. We will talk about many important topics. The first one is security guarantees, how to be sure that it won't happen again, which is the precondition of every kind of peace. I'm happy that we will discuss about that. I'm happy that we will begin from a proposal, which is the, let's say, Article 5 model, which was Italian at the beginning. So we are always ready to bring our proposals for peace, for dialogue. It's something we have to build together to guarantee peace and to defend the security of our nation. So thank you, Mr. President, for hosting us.
Thank you very much. Emmanuel?
Thank you, Mr. President, for organizing this meeting and for your commitment. And everything was said, but I just have to say here, everybody around this table is in favor of peace. And we work very hard, and we've worked very hard during the past few years to have a peace which is a robust and long-standing peace. This is why the idea of a trilateral meeting is very important, because this is the only way to fix it. And by the way, I think as a follow-up, we would need probably a quadrilateral meeting, because when we speak about security guarantees, we speak about the whole security of the European continent. And this is why we are all united here with Ukraine on this matter. In order to organize such a trilateral meeting, your idea to ask for a truce or a ceasefire, at least to stop the killings, as we discussed, is a necessity. And we all support this idea. And in order to have such a long-standing peace for Ukraine and for the whole continent, we do need these security guarantees. And the first one is clearly a credible Ukrainian army for the years and decades to come. And the second one is our own commitments, all of us. And we worked very hard during the past few months among the coalition of the willings, with the support of NATO, to build the different pillars of security guarantees and our commitments. And you can be sure that the Europeans are very lucid about the fact that they have their fair share in these security guarantees for Ukraine, but their own security is clearly at stake in this situation. So you can count on us, as we can count on you, in order to deliver this robust peace for both Ukraine and Europe.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you for hosting us here. Can I start where Emmanuel started, which is we all want peace. The war in Ukraine has had a huge impact, particularly on the Ukrainians who've borne the brunt of it, but it's also had an impact on Europe and on the United Kingdom. There's not a family or community that hasn't been affected. And when we talk about security, we're talking about the security not just of Ukraine, we're talking about the security of Europe and the United Kingdom as well, which is why this is such an important issue. I think this is such an important meeting. As a group, I think we've had a discussion on the phone a number of times, Mr. President, but be able now to be around the table to take it forward. And I really feel that we can, I think, with the right approach this afternoon, make real progress, particularly on the security guarantees, and your indication of security guarantees, of some sort of Article 5 style guarantees, fits with what we've been doing with the Coalition of the Willing, which we started some months ago, bringing countries together and showing that we were prepared to step up to the plate when it came to security. With you coming alongside, the US alongside what we've already developed, I think we could take a really important step forward today. A historic step, actually, could come out of this meeting in terms of security for Ukraine and security in Europe. I also feel that we can make real progress towards a just and lasting outcome. Obviously, that has to involve Ukraine, and a trilateral meeting seems the sensible next step. So thank you for being prepared to take that forward, because I think if we can ensure that that is the progress out of this meeting, both security guarantees and some sort of progress on trilateral meeting of some sort to bring some of the difficult issues to a head, then I think today will be seen as a very important day in recent years in relation to a conflict which has gone on for 3 and a bit years, and so far nobody's been able to bring it to this point. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much. And, you know, it's very interesting because this is the first for the White House. You can't say that very often. It's seen a lot over the years, since 1800, 1799, to be almost exact. But this is the first where we've had so many prime ministers, presidents, the heads of European nations. And by the way, Alex, I'd like you to say a couple of words, too. You're a young, powerful man. Before I finish up, I want you to say a couple of words. Go ahead.
I'll take the notion of youth back to my wife and try to convince her. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think in the past 2 weeks, we've probably had more progress in ending this war than we have in the past 3.5 years. And I think the fact that we're around this table today is very much symbolic in the sense that it's Team Europe and Team United States helping Ukraine. And the progress that we're looking out of this meeting is about the security guarantees, which are a big part of this. And then, of course, moving towards a process with a trilateral meeting with you and President Putin and President Zelenskyy. Some of the international media might wonder, why is the President of Finland here? I think the reason is probably that we might come from a small country, but we have a long border with Russia, over 800 miles. And we, of course, have our own historical experience with Russia from World War II, the Winter War and the War of Continuation. And if I look at the silver lining of where we stand right now, we found a solution in 1944, and I'm sure that we'll be able to find a solution in 2025 to end Russia's war of aggression and find and get a lasting and just peace. The situation is very difficult, but that's why we're here.
Thank you, Alex, very much. Good job. So we're going to be meeting for a while, and we're going to discuss some of the issues. And I don't think there's any issue that's overly complex. It's at a point now where people want to do things. I really do believe. I've known him for a long time. I've always had a great relationship with him. I think that President Putin wants to find an answer too. And we'll see. And in a certain period of time, not very far from now, a week or 2 weeks, we're going to know whether or not we're going to solve this, or is this horrible fighting going to continue. We'll do our best to get it ended. And I believe you have two willing parties, and usually that's good news, but two willing parties that want to make a deal. And we'll journey together, and we'll go over and we'll see if it can be done. And it's possible it might not be able to be done. On the other hand, it's possible it will. And we're going to save thousands and thousands of lives a week. And so it's something we really have to do. And, or at least we have to give it our best. It's all you can do. You can give it your best. But I think we may have a very good outcome. So I want to thank you all, and the media, I want to thank you. We're going to be staying here for a little while. Then we're going to walk over to the Oval Office, and we're going to have another little discussion about similar matters. And then they're going to go home to their great countries and report. And I'm going to remain here and work, and you're going to go and work. We're all going to be working. We may be in a different location, but that's what we know how to do is work. But I want to thank the media. Has been actually very fair, generally speaking, very fair. I think it's important that they're fair because this is a very important subject. We have to get it ended, and so that's all we ask for is fairness with the media. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, as we heard there, Donald Trump opening those high-stakes talks at the White House with European leaders on the war in Ukraine, hearing from each leader in turn, starting with Volodymyr Zelenskyy, Sir Keir Starmer also among them, echoing a united call for peace. They now make their way, after those brief statements from each of the leaders, they now make their way to the Oval Office. I'll just bring you a recap of a few lines from the US president. He said there were important discussions ahead to stop the killings. He also revealed that he had covered a lot of territory with Volodymyr Zelenskyy prior to that wider meeting with EU leaders around the table. He says he will call Vladimir Putin, Russian president, straight after today's discussions, promising, he said in his words, to put the war to sleep. So do stay with us throughout this evening for plenty more from the White House and the Oval Office. For now, though, let's head over to State of the Nation.
Tune into GB News Radio wherever you are, online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.